Hebrews chapter 5, beginning in verse 1. Hebrews 5, beginning in verse 1. For every high priest is taken from among men, is appointed for men in things pertaining to God, that he may offer both gifts and sacrifices for sins. He can have compassion on those who are ignorant and going astray. And last week we talked about the differences in the types of sins and all the other stuff. Since he himself is also subject to weakness, because of this, since he's subject to weakness, he is required, as for the people, so also for himself to offer sacrifices for sins, for his own sins. And no man takes this honor to himself, but he who is called by God, just as Aaron was. So also, meaning Christ also is called, so also Christ did not glorify himself to become high priest. But it was he who said to him, You are my son, today I have begotten you. As he also says in another place, you are a priest forever according to the order of Melchizedek. And we'll only talk about those two passages there. All right, without looking at your notes, nobody cheat. What two verses are quoted right there? You are my son, today I have begotten you. Where's that quoted from? Don't cheat. Psalm something. Everybody guess Psalm 110? How many of you think Psalm 110? Raise your hand. You're wrong. You're my son, today I have begotten you. It's actually Psalm 2. The next verse is Psalm 110. You are a priest forever according to the order of Melchizedek. So Psalm 2, what do you think it means when it says in Psalm 2, You are my son, today I have begotten you? Don't look at the notes, cheaters.
I'm going to say it has to do with the resurrection.
Why do you think it has to do with the resurrection, Jordan? Why not the incarnation?
I'm going to say it has to do with the resurrection.
Touche. Okay, let's look at the notes. The book of Acts tells us, Travis said. That's good. We'll go there in just a second. Okay, number one, here's a main point for today. Christ's priesthood is not something he signed up for. It is an appointment by God the Father. Now, this is a unique priesthood. Yes or no? Did all the priests under the Old Covenant eventually die? Okay, this is a specific type of priesthood. It's a priesthood where the priest never dies. So it's got to be someone uniquely qualified, namely somebody that never physically dies or whose flesh does not see corruption. We'll get to that in just a second. Okay, let's go to the notes. Just like no one chose to be priest under the Old Covenant system, Christ likewise did not glorify himself, according to verse 5, to be the high priest in the New Covenant. Rather, he was appointed to this office by God the Father. Hey, ladies, he was appointed to this office by God the Father. This is an eternal office. Let me read that again. This, the priesthood of Christ, is an eternal office. Since Christ does not die like the rest of the priests did, he was appointed to this as he was begotten. All right, let me say it again. He was appointed to this eternal priesthood as he was begotten. This is not a reference to his incarnation, but rather it's a reference to his resurrection. And you ask the question, you say, well, how do you know that? How do you know that you are my son, today I have begotten you as a reference to the resurrection? Well, like Travis said, the book of Acts tells us. Let's go to Acts chapter 13.
Chapter
13, beginning in verse 26. And I'll read it so all the people on the internet don't gripe at me because they can't hear it read. They gripe when I don't say what questions you asked and what the answers were. They gripe when I write in green marker, and they gripe when I don't read the verses. So all to please, man, all to please. You're all welcome. Okay, verse 26. Men and brethren, sons of the family of Abraham, and those among you who fear God. To you, the word of this salvation has been sent. Now, when it says those delineations, I take that to be Jew and Gentile, family of Abraham, and those among you who fear God. There were God-fearing Gentiles, just as there were those of the family of Abraham. Quick question. All 12 tribes, did the 12 tribes come from the family of Abraham, yes or no? There you go. So it can't be a reference to those who fear God. The Gentile reference can't be to the 10 northern tribes there. It's got to be, I think, to those who were outside of the 12 tribes, mainly those who did not come from Israel. Is that too much? That makes sense? There are times in the New Testament when I think Gentiles refers to the 10 northern tribes coming back in. There are also times when I don't think that Gentiles refers to the 10 northern tribes coming back in. There are some people that always think it refers to the 10 northern tribes who are called Israel only. And they think that every Gentile reference is to the 10 northern tribes, meaning that salvation was always only intended for Israel, and I reject that 100% completely. Fair? Okay. 27. For those who dwell in Jerusalem and their rulers, because they did not know him, nor even the voices of the prophets, which are read every Sabbath, have fulfilled them in condemning him. So, yes or no, did the Old Testament predict that they would condemn the Messiah when he showed up? Okay. And though they found no cause for death in him, remember when Pilate said, I find no fault in the man? They asked Pilate that he should be put to death. Remember when Jesus was on trial? Remember when Pilate asked him, or was it Herod? No, it was Pilate, I think. Pilate said, well, okay, what did he do? And they said, do you think we would bring him to you if we didn't find any fault in him? And then they never said what he did because he was, yeah, it's good. And though they found no fault, cause of death in him, they asked Pilate that he should be put to death. This is another point. Who does the Bible always seem to attribute the death of Jesus to? The Romans or the Jews? The Jews. That's an important point. Though you killed him, Peter says earlier in Acts. Verse 29. Now, when they had fulfilled all that was written concerning him, they took him down from the tree and they laid him in a tomb. But God raised him from the dead. He was seen for many days by those who came up with him from Galilee to Jerusalem, who are his witnesses to the people. And that's Acts chapter 1. You will be my witnesses. It was those who had seen him after the resurrection. Verse 32. And we declare to you glad tidings. Now, if Luke's writing this, and I take it that Luke would have been somewhat part of this somewhere or another, we declare to you glad tidings that promise which was made to the fathers. This is Paul talking. So did Paul see him, yes or no, after he resurrected? Where? Road to Damascus, Acts 9. That's good. Okay, and we declare to you glad tidings, that promise which was made to the fathers. God has fulfilled this for us, their children, in that he has raised up Jesus. As also it is written in the second Psalm, you are my son, today I have what? Notice how it connects the resurrection to the begotten. So the begotten, as Jordan said, is about the resurrection. Why do we know that? Paul said it specifically in Acts chapter 13, quoting Psalm 2, about the resurrection. So it's unique to the office of priest that Jesus is the only begotten Son, meaning he's the only one that can fulfill the office because he's the only one who's resurrected. Now, I want to make an important note here that I don't think people understand. There's a general idea that you and I, that our body will come out of the ground. But let me ask you a question. Has Abraham's body come out of the ground yet? Yes or no? Is Abraham's body corrupted then if it's been in there for a couple thousand years? There's only one promise to one person whose body would not see corruption. You know who it is? The Messiah. Whoever the Messiah was, and Paul says it's Jesus. Acts 2, Peter says it's Jesus when he quotes the same stuff. Watch this. Well, I got an answer.
Talking about bodies, like the people that didn't die, and they took their body on to heaven.
Who didn't die?
Elijah and Enoch.
What would you do with Hebrews 11 where it lists Elijah and Enoch and it says these died in faith? I don't know. I don't know about that. That you're over my pay grade there. I'm not sure if Elijah and Enoch died or not. Okay, there are people that make the case because of Hebrews 11 that they did die. Because the word that's used there for death, when it says they were, remember like in the passages about Enoch and Elijah, when it says they were taken and they were not, those words translated all over the rest of the Bible are translated death. That same word. When they were not, meaning they died. So some people take that route. I've not spent enough time yet in that. So that's fair to say, if you want to say Elijah and Enoch, that's fair. I don't know. I don't want to act like I know something that I don't. So I need more time there. It is interesting, though, that the same word for not or taken is the same word translated all over the place everywhere else is died. And why does Hebrews 11 say these all died in faith, including Elijah and Enoch? Food for thought. I don't know. I don't think it changes anything either way, but that's a fair question, Miss Karen. I think it was very much on topic, too. Anybody got anything they want to add to that?
The guys that came back and died on the streets,
In Revelation, the two witnesses? Are they real people or are they symbolic? Some people think it's Elijah and Moses. Some people think it's Elijah and Enoch. Most people think it's Moses and Elijah, but I don't know. Some people think it's the law and the prophets, a representative. Some people think it's real. Some people think it's symbolic. I don't know. It's a fair question. It's probably connected, though. What about Elijah? Is Elijah in there? Huh? On a chariot of fire? I'd have to study it more. I've heard people make the case both ways. So, yeah, okay, here the point being this though. Jesus' body was in the ground, and all of the Old Testament past, Psalm 34 is where it's quoted from, I think. Psalm 34 attributes the fact that Jesus' body, though it was in the ground, did not see corruption. How long did the body have to be in the ground in order for it to be corrupted? Like 4 days, right? So that's why you get the resurrection on the third day. Remember how long was Lazarus dead? Remember they said Lazarus had been dead for how long? For 4 days. And at day 4, I think they taught that the spirit departed. Jordan.
You know, that same passage says you will not let my body see corruption. Doesn't it also say that you will not abandon my soul to Sheol?
Yes.
So, going back to Enoch and Elijah, if God took them, no one could go back into the presence of God yet, right? Because atonement hadn't been made.
That's my understanding, but what do you do with Elijah and Enoch? Fair questions.
So did they go to be in the presence of God, which Scripture teaches the opposite, or did they go to Sheol?
All right, here's what Jordan's saying. Hebrews 9 says that no one could go into heaven until the temple that stood in Jerusalem was torn down. Okay? Hebrews 9 says that. Also, Revelation 11, 18 and 19 says that the temple of God was opened in heaven whenever Old Covenant Jerusalem was destroyed in AD 70. All right? Jordan's question is, how then could Elijah and Enoch go into that temple that wasn't opened yet in heaven? So he's saying, if their physical body went to heaven, did their soul not go to Sheol or Hades and await the resurrection at AD 70 for those who were in Hades and Sheol? Well, we just jumped this way into the deep end. Does everybody see the problem? No, it's a good thought, but here's the problem. I don't know the answer to it, and I don't want to act like I do. But okay. Let me rehash this, because this is a fair point. I think we're far enough to handle this conversation. Okay? Here's the deal. When the Old Testament, y'all get me a brand new set of markers, and this is what I get. All right, this one works. That's good. That was probably an old one. All right. When the Old Testament saints died, let's exclude Elijah and Enoch, just for the sake of the argument, because I don't know the answer to those. When the Old Testament saints died, did they go to heaven? Let's talk about the believers. When Abraham, Moses, Jacob, when they died, did they go to heaven? Yes or no? All right, so whatever your concept of Sheol is, I don't care, they went to Sheol. Is everybody good with that? Turn to Daniel 12 right quick, and I'll show you this. This is a good conversation. And it's one I haven't studied, so thanks for throwing this in here. I was just trying to prove that Paul said begotten means resurrection, and I wind up going to this. All roads lead to Daniel 12. All right, Daniel 12 is about the time of the Great Tribulation. Daniel 12 is about the 3.5 years, I think, from 66 to 70 AD. Look at Daniel chapter 12, verse 7. What?
Find out who the holy people are today?
Yeah, maybe we'll. I'm waiting. Listen,
I just want to know.
I am waiting for anybody in world history and anybody that's alive today to explain to me who the holy people are in Daniel 12, chapter 7. Okay, because everybody agrees this is the time of the Great Tribulation. This is the time of all this other stuff. Watch this in 12:7. I heard a man clothed in linen who was above the waters of the river, when he held up his right hand and his left hand to heaven and swore by him who lives forever, that it shall be for a time, times, and half a time. There's your 3.5 year Great Tribulation. I don't care if you're pre-meal, all-meal, post-meal, pan-meal, FP, whatever you are, that's the 3.5 year Great Tribulation, whether it's past, present, or future. Okay? Now watch this. And when the power of the holy people had been completely shattered, all these things shall be finished. All right, so the question is, who are the holy people? And I would take Old Covenant Israel that rejected Jesus. Who are the only holy people alive today? Who's the holy people alive today? The church. The only way to put this in mind in your future, friends, is to say that the church gets completely shattered in mind in your future, okay? And nobody's teaching that because they get them raptured off the planet. All right? So that ain't going to work. This better be the Jews or you got a whole bunch of trouble. The problem is the resurrection is posited at this time when the holy people are shattered. Remember Luke 21:22? These are the days of vengeance when all things that are written will be what? Fulfilled. Same idea. When all these things are completely finished, the power of the holy people is shattered. Look down at verse 8. This is my favorite verse in the whole thing. Although I heard, Daniel said, I did not what? I didn't get it. Okay, amen. Then go read 1 Peter 1 where it says the prophets were looking to this stuff and they didn't get it, but in the New Testament time, God was continuing to reveal it. Remember what Daniel 12 says earlier? Look at Daniel 12 verse 4. You, Daniel, shut up the words and seal the book for till the time of the end. Seal it up, Daniel. It's a long way off. Remember Revelation 22:8-10? Don't seal it up. The time is what? Near or at hand. But watch what Daniel's told. Many shall run to and fro, and knowledge shall do what? Increase. That's knowledge that would increase was the knowledge of the revelatory plan of God that the divinely inspired apostles and prophets in the New Testament were given through the power of the Spirit. Paul said, now we know in part. Okay, they had progressive continual knowledge that Daniel and them didn't have. But look what Daniel's told in verse 13. But you go your way, Daniel, till the time of the end, for you shall rest, meaning you're going to go in the grave, and you will arise to your inheritance. When? At the end of the days. Well, that's the same time of the end when the holy people are shattered. When would Daniel then arise? 80-70. Oh, by the way, everything's fulfilled then. The redemptive plan's restored then. The temple of God in heaven is opened then. What's that do to Moses and Elijah? I don't know, because I can't harmonize that with Hebrews 9 and with Revelation 11. Could they have gone to heaven earlier than that? I guess that's possible, and I think that's also why some people try to make the case that they didn't die. Brooke read Hebrews 11:5, where it says he was taken and did not see death. I can't harmonize that. I don't know what to do with that. I firmly confess, if I'm strong on something, I'll tell you. If I don't know something, I'll tell you. I can't harmonize Enoch and Elijah with that. I can't do it. Just because I can't, that doesn't mean I won't be able to one day, and it doesn't mean somebody else can't right now. I just don't know the answer to it. Is that fair? But I am sure on this. Daniel chapter 12 is a mine in your past, and there ain't no stinking way around that one. Somebody tell me who the holy people are in Daniel 12:7. So anyway, all right. No, I don't. I know. Okay. Anyway, let's carry on. Carry on. He would agree with me on that. Let's go back to Acts. Where was I at? No more questions. I'm kidding. It's good questions. Acts 13. Let's read let's start in 33. God has fulfilled this for us, their children, in that He is... Let me stop. Did that confuse everybody, what we just talked about? Or does everybody see the deal? Here's what I'm saying. There are some people who think that Daniel's body came out of the ground along with Abraham and all the rest of them in AD 70. I do not believe that their body came out of the ground then. Okay? I don't think the Bible was ever trying to teach us that... I don't think the Bible was ever trying to teach us that physical bodies were cursed and that physical bodies were going to come out of the ground. I think the curse was that men were separated from God. The fullness of the redemptive story was laid out under everything in the Old Covenant. Once it was fulfilled, then those who were in Hades, which was the place of separation, those would be raised, and the living saints at that time would never go into Hades, but when they died, like us now, we would die and go to heaven. I think that's the intent of that. I think the Bible is unique to this one thing. The Bible is unique in predicting that the Messiah would be raised out of the ground, that His body would be raised. Now, why would the Messiah's body be raised? Okay? Well, that's a spiritual reality, and I'm dependent upon Him for all my spiritual fullness. Why does the body of the Messiah need to be raised? What would it be for everybody else? It would be a sign. Okay? The physical resurrection is a sign that Jesus could accomplish spiritually, that He could pay for sins. What greater thing could you get than a resurrection? You don't believe me, it's a sign. Hold your spot in Acts and go over to Matthew 16. This is why the story of Jonah is so important. Matthew 16, verse 1. Then the Pharisees and the Sadducees came, and testing him, they asked that he would show them a what from heaven. He answered and said to them, when it's evening, you say it's fair weather, for the sky is red. In the morning, and be foul weather today, for the sky is red and threatening. Hypocrites, you know how to discern the face of the sky, but you cannot discern the signs of the times. They were in the times. A wicked and adulterous what? Generation seeks after a sign. By the way, how long did Jonah preach to Nineveh? Said, you got how many days or judgments coming? And that 40 is the same sign as the 40-year generation that they had then. And they repented, but these people in Jesus' day didn't. Well, most of them. It was a narrow way, those who did. A wicked and adulterous generation seeks after a sign, and no sign shall be given to it except the sign of the prophet what? And Jonah was how many days in the valley of Sheol in the beast? He was 3 and rose up out of it. Jesus, 3 days, that's the picture, rises up out of it. His flesh does not see corruption. Wasn't in there 4. Make sense? Here's what I'm saying. I don't think the Bible is predicting that anybody's body rises out of the ground other than the Messiah's body. And I think it's a sign to validate his priesthood. It's a sign to validate that he could accomplish what God said he could accomplish. What greater thing could you get? Remember they kept saying in that parable, they said, well, if we just saw this and this, and then Jesus says in the parable, if you saw a man come back from the dead, you wouldn't believe. So I think that's Luke 16. All right, anyway, let's keep reading. Acts 13. As it's written in the 2nd Psalm, you are my son, today I have begotten you. And that he raised him up from the dead, no more to return to corruption. He has spoken and said, I will give you the sure mercies of David. Therefore he also says in another psalm, I will not allow your Holy One to see what? For David, after he had served his own generation by the will of God, fell asleep, was buried with his fathers, and saw what? But he whom God raised up saw no corruption. Therefore let it be known to you, brethren, that through this man is preached to you forgiveness of sins. Everyone who believes in him is justified, things which you could not be justified by for the law of Moses. All right, and I'll leave that there. So that's the point. So when he's begotten, it means he's resurrected. He's resurrected to this eternal priesthood. Let's go read Psalm chapter 2. So it gives us something to think about at least. And I also want to say, no matter what we think we know or how much we think we know, please don't let me ever give the impression that I know everything, because I did not. And I don't think that I do. So, but I'm going to know more next week than I know this week. And I'm going to know more in 2 years than I know right now. And the more you study stuff, the more you can become sure of it. There were things that I wasn't sure of a year ago that I'm sure of now. There were things that I wasn't sure of when we started Hebrews that I'm sure of now. I wasn't sure on Angelos when we started it. I'm about 96.5% sure that Angelos is human messengers now. So that's just the way this goes. I think Psalm 2 has definitely application to mine in your time, but I think Psalm 2 specifically is about the prophetic nature of what was happening in the first century. Why do the nations rage? The peoples plot a vain thing. The kings of the earth set themselves, and the rulers take counsel together against who? The Lord and His anointed, saying, let us break their bonds and cast away their cords from us. Meaning, remember what they said to Jesus? We're not going to have Him rule over us. We don't want Him. He who sits in the heavens shall laugh. The Lord shall hold them in derision. Then He shall speak to them in His wrath and distress them in His deep displeasure. Yet I have set my king on my holy hill where? Hebrews 12. They're headed to Mount Zion, the city of the living God, the new covenant. I will declare the decree. The Lord has said to me, you are my son. Today I have begotten you. Now we need to make an emphasis here. The resurrection declares 2 things that we'll get to. The resurrection declares that Christ is able, number 1, to be priest, and that He's able to be king. 2 very important offices. Ask of me, I will give you the what for your inheritance, and the ends of the earth for your possession. Remember the Great Commission? Jesus said, all authority has been given to me in heaven and on earth. Go therefore make disciples of all nations. Ethnos. You shall break them with a rod of iron. You shall dash them to pieces like a potter's vessel. You want to see that language? You can see it all over Revelation, specifically Revelation 2, Revelation 3, Revelation 19. Jesus comes in judgment, breaks them in pieces, potter's vessel. Also, by the way, potter's vessel, all the time you see it over and over. God said to who? I am the potter, you are the clay. Said to Israel. Now therefore be wise, O kings, be instructed, you judges of the earth. Serve the Lord with fear and rejoice with trembling. Kiss or accept the Son, lest he be angry and you perish in the way. When his wrath is kindled but a little, blessed are those who put their trust in him. All right, back to the notes. Another connection should be made to Malachi 3, where God would appoint his messenger. This messenger is Jesus. And Malachi 2:7 helps us to see that God was appointing a priest for a new covenant. Malachi is all about the corruption and wickedness of the priesthood. So in Malachi 2:7, it says that his priests were the messengers of the old covenant who had gone astray. You turn right around. Malachi 3:1, it says, behold, I will send my messenger before your face. And it's capitalized because they recognize the messenger points to Jesus. He is the messenger or the priest appointed in the new covenant. God is the one that sent him. He proved this by the resurrection of the dead. There is an emphasis in Psalm 2 that Jesus is the Son of God and only he is given this title. And with it comes an everlasting priesthood. Okay, point number 2. Jesus is the king priest. Under the old covenant, could the king assume the role as priest? Yes or no? Bad idea. Go to 1 Samuel 13. We'll start there. First Samuel 13. Let's start in verse 1. What's your heading say? Saul's failure, Saul's unlawful sacrifice. What is Saul? What's his title? King. Verse 1. Saul reigned 1 year, and when he reigned 2 years over Israel, Saul chose for himself 3,000 men of Israel. 2,000 were with Saul at Michmash and in the mountains of Bethel. Mountains of Bethel. Bethel means house of God. And 1,000 were in with Jonathan in Gibeah of Benjamin. The rest of the people he sent away, every man to his tent. Jonathan attacked the garrison of the Philistines that was in Gibeah, and the Philistines heard of it. Then Saul blew the trumpet throughout all the land, saying, let the Hebrews hear. Now all Israel heard it, that Saul had attacked the garrison of the Philistines, and that Israel also had become an abomination to the Philistines. And the people were called together to Saul at Gilgal. When the Philistines gathered together to fight with Israel, 30,000 chariots, 6,000 horsemen, the people as the sand which is on the seashore in multitude, and they came up and encamped in Michmash on the east of Beth-aven. When the men of Israel saw that they were in danger, for the people were distressed, then the people hid in caves and thickets and rocks and holes and in pits. Some of the Hebrews crossed over the Jordan to the land of Gad and Gilead. As for Saul, he was still in Gilgal, and all the people followed him trembling. Then he waited 7 days according to the time set by Samuel, but Samuel did not come to Gilgal, and the people were scattered from him. So Saul said, bring a burnt offering and peace offerings here to me. And he offered the burnt offering. Now it happened, as soon as he had finished presenting the burnt offering, that Samuel came, and Saul went out and met him, that he might greet him. And Samuel said, what have you done? Saul said, when I saw the people were scattered from me, and that you did not come within the days appointed, and that the Philistines gathered together at Michmash, then I said, the Philistines will now come down on me at Gilgal, and I have not made supplication to the Lord. Therefore I felt compelled and offered a burnt offering. Samuel said to Saul, you have done what? Foolishly. You have not kept the commandment of the Lord your God, which he commanded you. For now the Lord would have established your kingdom over Israel forever. But now your kingdom shall not continue. The Lord has sought for himself a man after his own heart, and the Lord has commanded him to become commander over his people, because you have not kept what the Lord commanded you. So Saul lost the kingdom because he tried to play priest and king. Make sense, everybody? All right, go over to 2 Chronicles. We'll see another example. 2 Chronicles 26. Verse 16 is where we'll start. All right, this is Uzziah. He's familiar to us. Uzziah took over. Uzziah took over when he was a young kid, and he became progressively more wicked. Verse 16. But when he was strong, his heart was lifted up to his destruction. For he transgressed against the Lord his God by entering the temple of the Lord to do what? Burn incense on the altar of incense. So Azariah the priest went in after him, and with him were 80 priests of the Lord, valiant men, and they withstood King Uzziah and said to him, It is not for you, Uzziah, to burn incense to the Lord, but for the priests, the sons of Aaron, who were consecrated to burn incense. Get out of the sanctuary, for you've trespassed. You shall have no honor from the Lord. Uzziah became furious, and he had a censer in his hand to burn incense, and while he was angry with the priest, leprosy broke out on his forehead, before the priest in the house of the Lord beside the incense altar. And Azariah, the chief priest, and all the priests looked at him, and there on his forehead was lepers. So they thrust, and I think it's interesting that it's on his forehead also. So they thrust him out of that place. Indeed, he also hurried to get out because the Lord had struck him. King Uzziah was a leper until the day of his what? And he dwelt in isolation because he was a leper, for he was cut off from the house of the Lord. All right, so him acting as priest got him killed. Now, I think it's interesting. Turn over to Isaiah 6. I think it's interesting that Isaiah has this vision at the time that he has it. You're familiar with Isaiah 6. You saw it. You know the vision. What does Isaiah see in Isaiah 6? He sees the glory of the Lord. And I'm going to make the case specifically that Isaiah saw the resurrected Jesus sitting on the throne. He saw the priest king sitting on the throne, to whom glory and honor was given. But I want you to notice how Isaiah 6 starts. And I don't think there's anything that's coincidental in the Bible. Watch this. In the year that who died? How did Uzziah die? Leprosy, because he played priest and he shouldn't have been priest king. But think about it. In the year that Uzziah acted wickedly, it was the same year that Isaiah looks and sees the resurrected priest king sitting on the throne. He's essentially saying in Isaiah 6, you're not the Holy One given the honor of Melchizedek to be priest and king. I'm going to show you, Isaiah, who the one given honor to be priest and king is, and it's Jesus Christ. The New Testament tells us that essentially what Isaiah saw was Jesus seated on the throne, high and lifted up, and they were declaring, holy, holy, holy. That's the idea that Hebrews has in Hebrews chapter 5 when it brings in the idea of Psalm 110. So look back at Hebrews chapter 5, verse 6. Hebrews chapter 5, verse 6, it says this. He also said in another place, you are a priest forever according to the order of who? Melchizedek. Was he a king? Yes or no? Was he a priest? Yes or no? Melchizedek was a priest king. Uzziah dies because he tried to be priest king, but the priest king pointed forward to the fulfillment of the new covenant in Jesus Christ, who would be priest king after the order of Melchizedek. To the notes. Melchizedek was both priest and king. Jesus will likewise be given both offices along with that of prophet. The priesthood of Melchizedek is greater than that of Aaron, as Hebrews 7 will delve out for us. But first, let's go to Genesis chapter 14 and begin in verse 18. So Melchizedek doesn't show up a lot. He's just here for a couple verses. But he gets picked up majorly in the book of Hebrews chapter 7. I don't know if majorly is a word, but I used it. So whatever. Yeah, Genesis 14. I put all these in your notes too there. So Genesis 14, beginning in verse 18. Now Lot was down in Sodom. Remember, Chedorlaomer went down there and took it over. God sends Abram to win the battle. He defeats Chedorlaomer, wins Sodom back, gets Lot back. That whole battle happened at midnight. Now it's early morning. Abraham's coming back right at the dawn. Remember, Jesus is the morning star rising in their heart. The night is far off. Romans says the day is at hand. Jesus is the Melchizedek of the day. Here we go. Verse 18. Then Melchizedek, king of where? Oh, by the way, that's how David later knew where to build the temple at, in Jerusalem. Salem means Prince of Peace. Isaiah 9 says that Jesus was the Prince of Righteousness, and the New Testament Revelation tells us that Jesus is the Prince of Peace. Cool words. And he brought out what? You bet he did. You bet they had a communion meal. He was the priest of God Most High. And he was, now notice it says, then Melchizedek, king of Salem, brought out bread. He was the priest of God. He was both priest and king. Of a different order, though, than what would come from Abram. And he blessed him and said, he blessed Abram, blessed be Abram, God Most High, possessor of heaven and earth, and blessed be God Most High, who has delivered your enemies into your hand. Now, the next part of this verse confused me forever. It says, and he gave him a tithe of all. And I read that originally and I say, well, Melchizedek gave Abraham a tithe. There's a problem. Who just won all the spoils from the battle? Abraham did. Abraham's the one that gave a tithe to Melchizedek. Go to Hebrews chapter 7 and we'll see this. Hebrews 7. Beginning in verse 1. For this Melchizedek, king of Salem, priest of God Most High, who met Abram returning from the slaughter of the kings and blessed him, to whom also Abraham did what? So in Genesis 14, who gave the tithe? Abraham gave it to Melchizedek. And if you give somebody a tithe, what does that mean? Say it, Bob. Yeah, you're right. If you give somebody a tithe, you're saying you're inferior to them. You're coming underneath them. Make sense? All right, keep reading. To whom also Abram gave a tenth part of all, first being translated king of righteousness, and then also king of Salem, meaning king of peace, without father, without mother, without genealogy, having neither beginning of days nor end of life, but made like the Son of God, remains a priest continually. Now consider how great this man, Melchizedek, was, to whom even the patriarch Abraham gave a tenth of the spoils. And indeed, those who are the sons of Levi, Old Covenant, who receive the priesthood, have a commandment to receive tithes from the people according to the law, that is, from their brethren, though they have come from the loins of who? But he whose genealogy is not derived from them received tithes from Abraham, and blessed him who had the promises. Now, beyond all contradiction, the lesser, Abraham and the Levitical priesthood, is blessed by the better. Here, mortal men, notice how it connects Old Covenant to mortal men, by the way. That's important for 1 Corinthians 15, when mortality puts on immortality. Here, mortal men receive tithes, but there he receives them, of whom it is witnessed that he lives. Even Levi, who receives tithes, paid tithes through Abraham, so to speak, for he was still in the loins of his father when Melchizedek met him. Did everybody get that? You see what's going on there? It's saying, let me just read it. I'll read the last paragraph of the notes and we'll be done. The point is this. Aaron came from the loins of Abraham. This represents the Old Covenant. Abraham gave tithes or bowed down to Melchizedek. Therefore, Abraham submitted to Melchizedek. Jesus is the priest after the order of Melchizedek, not of Aaron. Therefore, Jesus' priesthood is greater than that of Aaron's. The new covenant priesthood supersedes the old. Just as Abraham submitted to Melchizedek, so also should those Hebrews in Jesus' day submit to Jesus, realizing that his priesthood is greater than the old covenant. Essentially, what the writer of Hebrews is saying is that Abraham realized that the priesthood that would come from him was lower than the Melchizedekian priesthood. And what the writer of Hebrews is saying is, your Levitical priesthood represents Abraham. Jesus' priesthood in the new covenant represents Melchizedek. You submit to it just like Abraham submitted to Melchizedek. It's a transfer of the priesthood in the book of Hebrews. Jesus is the Son, resurrected, the only one who could have this greater priesthood of a new covenant built on better promises, who is far greater than the old covenant priesthood. He doesn't have to offer sacrifices for his own sins because he never sinned. He is the one that brings the fullness of salvation like the old covenant priesthood could never do. Everybody got it? Makes sense? That's pretty good. All right, y'all figure out that Elijah and Enoch stuff and let me know. Okay, let's pray.